Sporadic gunfire still echoes through the streets there. The jihadist organisation has been largely pushed from the city. The SDF says that a stadium and a hospital recaptured by their fighters were the last bastions that were being clinged onto by the Islamic State group. Celebrations have already broken out, with flags being raised and street festivities taking place. Let's get the very latest from our regional correspondent, Adam Pletts, who joins us now from Beirut. Adam, clearly a monumental day for the Syrian Democratic Forces and the international alliance that backs them. What more do we know at this hour about the last hours of fighting in Raqqa and how this battle appears to have wrapped up?
Well, they are now saying that they're in complete control of the city. That's the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, who are these largely Kurdish but US-backed forces, together with their coalition partners who've announced the same thing. But the fighting did go up until right as close as overnight. Last night, they took some of the major installations that the Islamic State group was still holding on to, including a hospital and a stadium. And in those locations, as you said, they've now been raising flags. Most of those flags are actually the flags of the YPG, the Kurdish fighters, who are the predominant group in this SDF, Syrian Democratic Forces alliance. It's not a surprise that this has happened. They had been saying over the last few days, since before the weekend, that they expected to take back the whole of the city, saying that they could even have done so by Sunday. As it happens, it took a little bit longer, but that was sped up by the fact that there was an agreement over the weekend whereby a lot of the Islamic State group fighters left. Those who had Syrian backgrounds were able to withdraw from the city and head to other areas still held by the Islamic State group in the southeast of Syria, which meant that it was only foreign fighters left in the city fighting over these last 24 hours or so. Now, the SDF are not ruling out that there aren't still perhaps a small number of Islamic State group fighters there, but they're talking about numbers into the dozens, not the hundreds. And of course, they're still clearing the city out for booby traps and the like, which have already taken the lives of several of the SDF fighters.
And Adam, this, when it's confirmed, would be a victory that comes at a rather heavy price. Talk us through the civilian costs. Rebuilding the city will clearly, of course, take a lot of time.
Well, yes, the city may be taken back now, but this won't be the end of the plight for the many civilians who are displaced from it. We're talking about a city that's now very heavily destroyed after months of street-to-street fighting, as well as airstrikes, which was provided by coalition support to the SDF. This is a city that before the war had a population of 200,000 plus, now close to uninhabited, but there were civilians there in reasonably large numbers until very close to the end of the fighting, who had been forced to remain there by Islamic State group. And even in the last couple of weeks or so, as this battle was coming towards an end, the International Committee for the Red Cross said that as many as 1,000 women and children were arriving at individual camps that had been set up for people fleeing the city. And of course, their conditions are very difficult, and many of them won't be able to return straight away. The city is lacking infrastructure, many of the buildings, of course, destroyed. And so even when they are able to return, it'll be a question of rebuilding right from scratch for many of them.